Hey, everybody. So today I have Ron Hammond with the Blockchain Association. He's head of government relations. And today we're going to be talking about different strategy, which I think is pretty timely given Elizabeth Warren's bill has cropped up again. I know this is not the first time it's been introduced. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not. And she's just doing the typical shill thing where she's trying to link different illicit finance activities and counterterrorism efforts with the crypto, blockchain, Web3 industry. But without kind of going into the actual bill, Ron, one of the reasons why I love talking to you and have you on is I enjoy kind of the strategic aspect of this policy stuff. So I think it's kind of what goes unnoticed. A lot of people, when they look at an association like yours or an association like mine, I think they make the mistake of judging us based on, for example, the amount of bills that you pass. They don't always understand that when you're influencing politics, it goes far beyond that. And it's hard, it's kind of a hard metric to convince people of because how can you count all the bills that you've actually killed, right? That have been bad? Or how do you count when you get like one word or one line that could, or a comma that could screw over the entire industry out of there, right? So, one thing I wanted to talk to you about, and we can start with Elizabeth Warren, but I had some kind of other people I wanted to discuss with you is how do you go about like isolating someone like her? Like, how aggressive can you be? Have you guys even made any official statements? I mean, I know you probably can't be too edgy. You can't be like Elizabeth Warren's an idiot. Like, she still's a very powerful person, so you got to be careful. But when someone hates the industry as much as she does, what do you do?
Yeah, no. First off, I'm glad you're focusing on this because this is, I mean, a lot of folks have been focusing on the Jamie Dimon response, but honestly, the fact that Elizabeth Warren took the time to talk about crypto solely at a bank hearing, which is a Super Bowl of her hearings. This is where she makes a name for herself, and she goes on all the major new publications afterwards about how she hit Wells Fargo or she hit JP Morgan for XYZ. Yeah, this is the first time that she's actually spared all the CEOs. Again, it's always the question everyone's scared about is Elizabeth Warren's question. She spared all of them to focus on crypto. And I think that kind of shows like she's morphing into her new brand, which is she's not as much against private equity or against the banks as much anymore versus crypto. And there's no way we're going to be able to get her off the hate train here. And candidly, too, I think she kind of gaslights the industry sometimes. You mentioned the bill she just reintroduced. Actually, what she was trying to show is that actually she's gotten almost a quarter of the Senate actually behind her bill. That was the main push. So it's nothing brand new to the text itself. She's just trying to show, hey, look, I got a lot of media attention post-bank hearing, especially with Jamie Dimon's response. We already knew what he's going to say because he doesn't like Bitcoin. We know that for a fact. So it's nothing new. But the idea that she was trying to show to folks, both of the crypto industry, but also generally in the media, hey, look, I'm someone to be taken seriously. I have a core of the Senate on my bill. And what she's doing is she's going to the Senate floor, but also just meet with senators directly. Again, this is her personally. This is not the staff, which usually what a lot of staff did. You and I both have experience on that front. But we've seen her go explicitly to members, going into them and saying, dear 75-year-old senator from red state or blue state, do you want to cut down on money laundering and crypto? I'm sure you saw the headline about Binance. My bill does that. And that's it. And like, that's usually as far as it goes. And it's a really simple, good talking point. And we had to push back on that with substance. But as I said, when you're defending yourself so much, when you're talking about a certain issue, it tends to, put you in the back heel a lot more. We know we have the facts. Like that's the one thing that in this case where it's like, look, we actually have the facts. We have the facts to refute you against the Wall Street Journal op-ed that you pushed, or sorry, the story that you pushed. We had the facts push against the idea that this is solely used for crypto. Like we have the facts and the receipts. Now it's just a messaging war.
So how do you fight that? So for example, one thing that I've never understood, and I know it's tougher for you to comment given all of your members, but why I don't understand why the Web3 industry as a whole hasn't been very targeted with some of their messaging. And one thing that I've talked about is I don't know how much Web3 business there is in Massachusetts, but why haven't we run ads and commercials in the state of Massachusetts saying this is the amount of Web3 Bitcoin related jobs that are there? You interview some of the people who are working there, and then you blast those on commercials to where Elizabeth Warren's own constituents are like, wait, why are you trying to kill, even if it's only 50,000 jobs? Massachusetts is a small state. You could probably link some of the jobs to MIT, even though MIT is one of her big backers, right? So they're probably already in her pocket. That's kind of where she was made, right? Why isn't the industry being more targeted and focused toward that? Because from a strategic perspective, of course, you can go and talk to other people who she's getting on board, but Is it just a lost cause? I feel like that would still be a pretty lower budget, good idea if you just focus in on one state and run media ad campaigns.
Yeah, so actually, we're starting to see that a little bit of that strategy play out with Ohio, and so it's more focused on the reelection campaign here because Sherrod Brown, who's the Senate banking chair, the guy who's going to decide what bills move forward or not, he's also said, was it 3 months ago, 4 months ago, that the Elizabeth Warren bill was not going to be moving forward in his committee. Of course, this is pre-Hamas and October 7th, and so obviously that has shifted the political dynamics a little bit. And there are other bipartisan bills out there that have more heavyweights, candidly, than the Elizabeth Warren bill. That, like, for example, it's called a CAN-C. It's Warner, Reed on the Democrat side, and then we have Romney and Rounds on the Republican side. 3 of the 4 of those folks sit on the Senate Banking Committee. These are folks who actually have the jurisdiction here. Elizabeth Warren sits on the committee as well, but we haven't heard the same comments about her bill not moving forward from the chair. And then I think that's why we're mostly focusing on, Elizabeth Warren's easy one to bully. It's, AOC or someone who's really high profile in public service is going to lambast crypto or lambast a certain industry. They usually the ones taking the heat. But at the same time, a lot of folks bring up that she's not the one passing bills, and that's true. And we've done the political calculation. There are other bills out there that have way more damning substance than what her bill does. They go farther than her bill does. They're bipartisan. And so the idea is, look, a lot of folks are focusing on the Warren position, and that kind of moves all the conversation more to the very strict BSA, the Bank Secrecy Act that they're pushing for. Or, we're trying to say, look, let's try to actually focus on what we think could move, or what's some provisions that could actually move. Because what we're seeing, at least in DC, is that the amount of rhetoric, especially on crypto Twitter, is actually almost like a badge of honor for some of these folks, especially Senator Warren, because she's saying, look, this industry is so gun-ho about how I'm wrong, I must be right. If they feel this way. It's like when the banks are always complaining about capital standards, years ago, and even to this day, they were complaining. And a lot, especially Democrats, but some Republicans are saying, you guys wouldn't be raising a stink about this if you guys weren't trying to either hide something or protect your interests here. And we're watching out for the United States economy, or our view is that we're watching out for the economy. So, you guys really must be just trying to protect your own here. So I think that's kind of also the issue we got to work about, is that if she's going to, again, I use the word gaslight, but that's kind of what it is. She makes these really long statements and these hearing questions that are purposely going to get a lot of media attention, and crypto Twitter falls right for it. And we're trying to say, hey folks, look, there are way more other things out here, but you're kind of giving the Hill the perception that there's a problem here, and that there's nothing here. When in fact, I mean, again, even if you're so pro crypto, which a lot of folks are in DC, they're still going to say, hey, look, I don't care if it's $1 million or $10 going to Hamas. I don't want any going to Hamas. And I think that's kind of where we're at now, saying we can have a situation where we can support her goals, Elizabeth Warren, but her approach obviously is heavy-handed, and it's not going to go anywhere. So let's find a solution to this.
So it's interesting because it's a tough situation, because on one end, I can see exactly what you're saying as far as people yelling in media. But on the other end, what happens if they don't say anything? Then wouldn't people just say the inverse and be like, well, I guess they're okay with it, right? I guess they don't mind. I think she's purposefully painted herself as a villain. And it's my opinion, Elizabeth Warren has never been against the banks. I always say she's anti-small and medium-sized bank, and she's pro-big bank, right? Even though she gives lip service to roasting the Jamie Dimons of the world, all of her regulations have only helped them. And I think that's why she's kind of anti-crypto. But I still just don't get it. I don't get. So wait, let's go back to Sherrod Brown before I touch on that. So he's a Democrat. He's running for re-election in Ohio. Elizabeth Warren's powerful in the sense that Joe Biden owes her a lot of favors, right? And I think that's popular knowledge. I mean, in my opinion, she's the reason he's actually president. Her staying in the 2020 primary is the only thing that stopped Bernie from claiming a lot of the states in that primary. And you can look at the data on that. It's pretty clear. My assumption being, of course, her votes would have gone to the Bernie Sanders camp. And that was part of her bet, and it played off with Biden. And now she's become a powerful senator because of that. At what point does her power and sway in DC trump someone like a Sherrod Brown, right? To where she has Biden call him and go, or someone from Biden's staff and say, you need to put this up, for some kind of vote. And maybe her getting more senators on board, most of whom I assume are Democrats, almost shows that powerful swing, saying, okay, at some point, if you have half the Senate, or at least let's say you have 45 senators, can Sherrod Brown really withhold that kind of pressure from passing a bill that she wants?
Yeah, so, I mean, you raised a lot of the points here in terms of we have a lot of the deference giving to her on economic and monetary policy, especially given the 2020 election. Man, that was a long time ago. So she does get a lot of deference, and we've seen that actually with a lot of her staff and more alumni within her office being placed within the Biden administration, a lot of Treasury within the White House itself. Again, it's common in DC for that to happen when a party takes over for another party. They tend to pick a lot of folks from Capitol Hill who have policy experience in relevant areas for the White House. But we've seen a lot come from the Elizabeth Warren camp. And again, it's nothing new. It's a revolving door. It's how DC works, for better or for worse. But we have a lot of folks who look up to her in the administration. And she does carry also that progressive weight as well. And so maybe she's the person that's kind of leading the progressive charge here. But at the same time, we also have progressives like Richie Torres in the House who are complete opposite camp as her on this issue. And so I think for us, we're just trying to show, look, it's not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue or progressive versus conservative. We have champions on all sides of the aisles. We've worked hard to get to that point. The problem is that a lot of folks do look at her and say, it's all these damn Democrats here. And we're trying to say, look, it's actually not. And some of our best champions in Congress actually are the Democrats. And the reason why her legislation hasn't moved forward is because of the Democrats and telling Chuck Schumer and telling Sherrod Brown that they have issues with it. So that's why I think, at least the more attention we give her effort, I think it actually emboldens her a little more and realizing that there's actually more reason for her to stay in the news cycle, stay in the media. And I think that's, a lot of members in Congress, having worked for a couple, the media attention is something that's very, illustrious. A lot of folks look for that. Some folks come to Congress not to really do anything, but to get on social media and to get on, Fox News or MSNBC or what have you. So again, I think she's also realizing, like, taking a step back here, hitting the banks, hitting private equity. It hits a couple of nerves here and there. Here in crypto, the attention she's getting for a lot of these videos and the media engagement, it's through the roof. But the last thing we'll highlight is, and this is kind of like in terms of going back to strategy here. We said, okay, we know at least her personally hasn't taken a meeting with any one of our associations or our member companies. We got 110 plus in the industry, all the big players you can think of. And we said to her, okay, we have a conference in DC. It's a mile away. We would love to have you. You can pick the format. You can pick the speakers, but we want to just have you so you can hear from the industry. And again, the play was more of like, look, we know you're not taking our meetings. Your staff is. We want to thank your staff, but we'd love to have you personally, Senator, hear from us. And she turned it down. And again, she, like the secretary of the Treasury, or deputy secretary, number 2 at Treasury, he made time work. The House companion, who's leading her bill in the House, he took time to come meet with us. She was the only one that said she couldn't make it work. And I think, we gave her multiple days to also give us times as well. And I think it kind of shows she's not here to engage with the industry. She's here to get on TV. And I think the more we give her attention for this, it more emboldens her. But let's just remember, she has actively turned down to meet with the industry several times, both privately, and we decided to make it public. Hey, we offered it to her and she did nothing. When her actual House companion said, yeah, I'll do it. And he went into Lines In and talked to us. And he was, really curt. He was really straightforward that he didn't like the way the industry was handling compliance. But he took the time to talk to folks. And we haven't seen the same from her.
So how do you get to somebody like her? I mean, isn't the strategy you go to whoever influences a Warren? And I guess you could say that's a Gensler, but he's obviously in the same camp. But she's got to have some kind of network of people close to her. I mean, does that look like talking, once again, going local? Who is the head of the Democratic Party of Massachusetts? What's that relationship like? Like, why do you think? So from what I'm gathering, because I don't want to keep beating the question, it's not worth it to really focus in on her. We don't view her as that big of a danger. It's kind of a useless cause, at least so you think. So why even go and really invest money in Massachusetts, whether it be media or furthering relationships, because it'd be pointless?
I wouldn't say it's pointless, because actually the states, I mean, take Florida, for example, they actually really do, we've seen kind of move candidates along and also elected officials along the process. And there's a Boston Blockchain Council, I want to say is the title. Sorry, I butchered that. Apologies if it's council, what have you. They're doing a great job over there. We've actually seen Massachusetts have some pretty pro-crypto members on the Democrat side. So I take Jake Auchincloss, who he's a young up-and-comer. He's actually introduced a bill that was going to very much mirror what you did in Florida. It actually banned CBDCs, but it was the idea that the Congress had to have the final approval. Nothing can move forward unless Congress says so. And he was the lead Democrat on that with the lead Republican, French Hill. And he is very pro crypto. And we kind of seen this, again, it's more generational. And there's been rumors that he's eyeing Elizabeth Warren's seat, probably not this cycle, but maybe next cycle.
A primary candidate. Okay.
Potentially. There's Markey too, who's also potentially retiring. He's getting old as well. But I think it's, when you invest in folks in the states, the ones who are actually talking to candidates and policymakers, that's the kind of stuff where if folks are looking to say, hey, look, what am I going to differentiate myself from Elizabeth Warren if I'm running against her? This is one of those prime areas. And we've seen, again, a lot of the younger candidates really being open to that. But we don't have those conversations as much in DC because we're obviously focused a lot here on the folks who got elected already. And this is where, we can really, I've seen things change on my own end personally from folks like California, Florida, and New Massachusetts, and Texas, where the grassroots and the folks who organized and met with the candidates and the staff down in the actual states made a huge difference, not only at the state level, but the federal level as well. So there's other ways to imply pressure here, but by no means am I saying, abandon Massachusetts, because if anything, I think we should actually be pouring more resources in. But let's focus those on people who could either A, replace her, or B, focus to folks who will listen to her. And you brought up MIT. And I know the project Hamilton, the CBDC project research side of it was based out of there. But we really haven't seen much come from that in terms of her positions fully on the CBDC. I know there's some older interviews floated out there. But also it's something that at least in academia, they really do listen to those folks. And we have some good folks at MIT. I've talked to a couple of them over there. So that's another way to engage, is especially on the Democrat side, they really look forward to the academia side. They give a little more deference, whereas Republicans give a lot more deference to more the entrepreneurial crowd as well.
That's interesting. What's the name of the congressman in Massachusetts?
Jake Auchincloss, Auchincloss.
So, for example, would you be so aggressive as to do fundraisers for him, thinking that he might be eyeing the Senate? The hard part is Senator Warren's elections this year. So now you got another 6 years and you have a problem with Warren for 6 years. So now we're talking a 6 year from now strategy, which is really unfortunate. But that would be someone you might fundraise for or try to donate to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and we'll see this tactic place out. Again, I want to highlight that this is happening in Ohio right now, where we see it, Coinbase especially more lead the charge of going against Sherrod Brown and more for, they haven't really necessarily gone for his opponent. Bernie Moreno likely is going to be the opponent, but it's not, that primary hasn't happened yet. But Sherrod Brown is also the guy who can decide if crypto legislation lives or dies. Literally, he is the man that works Patrick McHenry, and those two have to make a decision to agree or disagree. And if he is feeling the pressure so much that he's saying, actually, I should probably be, shore up this flank, Ohio's gonna be a tough race, I actually should probably embrace the crypto folks to make sure I get this over the edge. Or he could take the other approach saying, screw the industry, they're actually backing my opponents, or they're backing against me. And therefore, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make these guys feel the sting of, me being here for as long, maybe it's 6 months, maybe or 6 years. And so it's a gamble. So especially with the chair. So we'll see how that plays out. Again, it's helpful. The likely Ohio Republican candidate will be a pro-crypto candidate and has been for quite some time. I dealt with him when I was a Hill staffer for an Ohio member of Congress back in 2017, 2016. So we'll see how that tactic plays. It's dangerous because the downsides are pretty immense. If let's just say the Democrats keep the Senate and Sherrod Brown's chair, and we have a very aggressive crypto vote against Sherrod Brown, he's going to remember that for quite some time. And he can make our life a living hell if he decides to do so. And we've seen that happen before with the banks getting involved in races, private equity getting involved in races. So there's precedent. It works, but there is sometimes put a target on your back. And if you don't calculate correctly, it can be tough.
And that's all politics, right? It's just reading the tea leaves and placing your bets and hoping that you win, right? Bernie is interesting because he has a lot of Florida ties. He actually used to, I don't know if he still does, but he used to own a lot of car dealerships down in Miami.
Really?
So he used to come. I know him, and I've actually talked with him, and I think his daughter used to be in Miami. Then she moved back to Ohio, and then I think she did something with the Trump campaign back in 2020, maybe 2019. But they have Florida ties, so it's kind of funny seeing them run in Ohio because I'm like, I know that guy. I've met that guy.
I don't know.
With
He actually made a surprise appearance at our summit. Like we had no idea he's coming by, and next thing I know, we had no idea he's coming by, and next thing I know, I
That's
just
smart.
see him walk in. I was like, "What are you doing here, man?"
That's
Uh,
smart. Good for
yeah,
him.
he's still a car guy, and he's doing car loans on the blockchain, I believe. I forgot the company.
Yes.
So he's been
Yeah.
great.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like to me, because before you said some of your biggest proponents are Democrats, but it sounds like to me your nightmare scenario would be if Democrats have the House and the Senate, right?
Largely, it's not because of the Democrat Party as a whole. It's because of the people in power. Because at least at
In the
least in
Democratic
Congress,
Party.
the Democrats give deference to seniority. So Republicans have internal rules that you can only be the chair of your committee for 6 years. And otherwise you're done. Whereas Democrats, you can stay in that senior position as long as you want until you retire, until you move up to another committee. And so, like Maxine Waters, that's why she's run the committee for almost 20 years or so plus, because she has got to the top dog spot and she wants to stay there and work on other issues like housing and diversity inclusion. Whereas like Chair Brown's, we're just his way up there too. He wants to focus on housing and labor union stuff. And so that's kind of the thing that a lot of folks who on the Democrat side really want to stay in power, at least, or stay in those committee chairs. And so if we have a Democrat all Congress, House and Senate, at least right now, it looks like those folks would not be pro crypto. Maxine Waters is actually pretty good on stable coins generally. But besides that, gives a lot of deference to Gensler and the SEC. So we'll see. But I would have to say, unfortunately, the Republican would be a lot better to have both in the White House as well as House and the Senate. Of course, I'm a Republican, a little biased here, because at least we'll see, folks like, maybe French Hill get a lot more seniority. We could have anyone new at the SEC, which I'm surely better than what we have now. Not saying it's always been perfect. Remember, the Trump administration had Steve Mnuchin, who almost tried to kill self-hosted wallets. So just because it's Republicans does not mean we're all in the clear here by any means. But we definitely need some new blood in there.
Yeah, I think I get it because you have to work with both sides of the aisle. And so you want to be careful with what you say. But one example I always tell people is it's no coincidence that Florida and Texas, which are deeply red states, are crypto havens, and California and New York are not. And people are leaving there. And I think that and those are Democratic states. So I think there's partial reality where it's like, I do think Republicans tend to be far more pro crypto, just from a free market sense, and kind of that libertarian-esque anti-Fed Ron Paul kind of meme, right? Which is, I think, which draws a lot more crypto people to the Republican side and vice versa. But when you deal in reality, it's like, okay. And I think it's actually a struggle for me because strategically, I think there can be benefits to making something like Web3 policy partisan. I think it's sometimes good to know that you're strictly in one camp and have allies in one camp and who you're fighting and to push behind them all the way. But once again, that's a bet, right? And if you lose that bet, you're screwed. So if there ever is a chance where you say Republicans are our friends completely and Dems gain power, you're screwed, right? And we see that with typical industries. You see that with ESG when Republicans take power, and you see that with guns when Democrats take power, and it's a flip-flop. But I think if Elizabeth Warren and her faction continue to get stronger, not weaker, I have a feeling that it's going to become more partisan. And I don't think the anti-CBDC stuff has helped. The fact that Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy are now pro-Bitcoin. RFK, who's no longer a Democrat, are pro-Bitcoin, who Democrats don't like, right? That's kind of just as a response. Democrats are going, yeah, we're anti whatever they're for, right? Which almost happens naturally. And to be honest, there's nothing you can do about that because what are you supposed to do? Sit on your hands? I mean, when we passed the anti-CBDC bill here in Florida, we had a lot of Democrats vote for it, but a lot of the Democratic leadership voted against it just because it was DeSantis and it was a pet project, right? And some of our talking points were the same. We're like, you understand that a lot of Democrats don't like the idea of Democratic voters don't like the idea of everything they buy being tracked. Like that's going to come to burn you. But leadership was still very like, we don't think this bill's needed. We think it's stupid. We think DeSantis is just doing pointless stuff. And sometimes that marketing becomes reality. And so, and the biggest fear that I have is like with seniority, people just fall in line. So even if they like it, I think I've kind of seen that with some of our congressmen here in Florida, like Darren Soto. I think he used to be a really huge champion, and maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, or you probably can't, to be honest. But I think he used to be a bigger champion than he is. And I think he's kind of lost some of his mojo, some of his influence. And I think that's because of people like Warren. So they kind of have to temper some of the stuff that they like if they want to get other things. I can't verify that, but that's kind of some of the feeling that I've gotten here.
Yeah, Darren Soto was the first Democrat office actually I worked with.
He was the co-chair, and maybe still is, of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus.
They're on energy and commerce. They're more focused on like the Federal Trade Commission, more the tech policy things. He actually just passed a blockchain related bill out of that committee actually last week. I think it was unanimous too. But yeah, he's not as much again fighting the SEC fights for the CFTC just because he doesn't fall in that committee. But also the staffer that was really behind a lot of those efforts. Bill Rockland, I love him. He's great. A good buddy of mine. He's actually now with Senator Gillibrand, fighting the fight over there. So, staff as you know, staff make a huge difference because if one staffer leaves, sometimes it can be that whatever policy they're working on goes to standstill because there's years of knowledge and efforts. But policy takes time. And so staff are really important. I totally agree in terms of just trying to thread the needle here with a lot of these fights. And we'll see, especially with the election and how this kind of turns out. I was kind of shocked that a crypto question got asked to Vivek. He did a great job pushing back on all the counterclaims from Jamie Dimon and the Hamas Wall Street Journal story that was proven false. But still, you're right. Things get a little partisan. And if my team is supporting something, then my team has to be the opposed to it, and vice versa. It just turns into that. And it's natural. It's politics. And so we've got to make sure we just try our best to be, when we're criticizing, Elizabeth Warren, this is not the Democrats here. This is Elizabeth Warren. She's a character. She likes to make it about herself. So let's make it the hate about herself. By all means, go for it. But let's also make sure we understand that she's building allies along the way. In crypto, we built a lot of allies. I mean, again, back in the day, you mentioned Darren Soto. It was just Warren Davidson, Darren Soto, and Tom Emmer, and like 2 or 3 others. And now we're kind of up to at least 100 here in Congress now, if you include the Senate. So, and again, pro crypto have a position, which is pretty nuts. And again, the anti-camp is growing a little bit, but nowhere at the rate we are on the pro side.
What's the relationship between someone like a Gillibrand and a Warren? Do you have any details on that? Both powerful Democrats, states are right next to each other.
Yeah, I mean, Gillibrand's important because, obviously New York. So Chuck Schumer, kind of like Sherrod Brown. Chuck Schumer is the lead of the Senate. Everything lives and dies in the Senate through him. You got to get him on board. And so Gillibrand's been really close with him, obviously from New York. So that connection is really important for a lot of things and has been important. Actually, we've seen it play out for a couple fights we've had in the past. At least when it comes to Warren, the thing about Gillibrand, she sits on the ag committee. So she kind of covers the CFTC portion. So she's big on that fight. Whereas Senator Lummis from Wyoming is more on banking. And so she deals more with Warren directly. And sometimes they actually come up next to each other in hearings for questions, which is always interesting to see the little back and forth.
Do they butt heads?
They do butt heads, but it's usually one responding to the other. Whereas, Lummis is something really pro crypto, and then Warren follows up saying, well, let's talk about reality here, or vice versa, where Senator Warren says something outlandish, and Senator Lummis is like, okay, let's bring it back down to the ground level here. So it's seen kind of a little back and forth here, but nothing like we see in the House in terms of really aggressive. But she makes this about herself, about her project, about her bill. We've been able to fight off a Republican on the House side bill version for a couple months now. And so I think it's a good, at least trying to show folks, hey, there's a lot of story about her effort gaining traction, but it hasn't been gaining traction in the House. And they've been trying to introduce that bill for a while, and there's no Republicans yet, still after months of trying. So I think it's still the red herring, but it builds that narrative, and that's something we always got to worry about. And lobbying it's not just going to that building over there or going to the states. It's also with the media. It's also with staff, and it's a whole holistic angle here. You just got to pull the right levers when you can. And as you well know, sometimes going nuclear early is probably not the right strategy. And you can only pull that fire alarm so many times. And I'm sure we're going to have a fire alarm situation in 2024. So we just want to make sure we utilize it properly.
So I guess my last question would be, this is kind of y'all's first presidential run. Of course, you guys were around in 2020, but I think you guys in the scene is so much more mature now politically. I think this is kind of like okay, let's see what's going to happen. So Are you guys going to get involved in the presidential race? Are you going to just steer clear of that because it's too controversial? Like, how is 2024's presidential election going to affect some of the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So I mean, at least on a personal capacity, I helped out with Andrew Yang's campaign a little bit back in the last cycle. And so he referenced the bill I helped out with Warren Davidson and Darren Soto as like his policy platform. So I've done this before in the past. Mike Bloomberg, I didn't directly consult his campaign, but they had some crypto stuff in there. But this cycle, we've seen Vivek, we've seen DeSantis, RFK Jr. I've talked to Vivek's and DeSantis' team. Nikki Haley's campaign I'm pretty close with as well. But we've only seen her say something on blockchain and more in regards to tech in China trying to steal IP. But I think largely to help us out, there's also Trump, and Trump has tweeted against crypto before publicly, obviously.
But he also has NFTs.
He also has NFTs. So, there's always the concern that when very divisive folks get involved in crypto, it kind of hyper partisan things very quickly. Elizabeth Warren's a good example. Trump's a good example. And so our view is like, staying in the weeds sometimes it's kind of nice because we kind of get to hopefully avoid that really nasty partisan fight, but it does bleed over as we're seeing recently. So I think
so you guys haven't really made overtures to Trump or Biden.
We've talked, at least on the campaign side, we've engaged them here and there. The Trump folks we haven't engaged with this cycle, to my knowledge, at least at the BA or Blockchain Association level. Some of our members have, to my knowledge, but I think we're always happy to be a resource. And our view is look, we're trying to show you kind of what the state of play is. We'll tell you all the bills in play. Here's some propositions that we like. It's up to you if it fits your campaign policy objectives. But we had that outreach. We'll see how it goes. But I don't think largely to be focused on the SEC, CFTC is likely to be central bank digital currencies. And a lot of the work that DeSantis, that thanks to you, led over there. I think that seems to be the one that gets a lot more attention because it's privacy, China, globalization, crypto tangentially. So there's a lot of elements that the everyday American can more resonate with.
It's funny just because, and I hope this isn't insulting, but no one seems to focus on the real presidential contenders. Like, I get why people love Vivek, but I think it's very obviously he has no shot. And same with someone like an RFK. And I do believe that. I think it's all on DeSantis potentially, but then that leaves you with three options. You have DeSantis, a Donald Trump, and then a Biden. And it really seems like a lot of people, I don't know if scared's the right word, but I wonder why we don't see more initiatives working with the Trump campaign or with the Biden campaign. Of course, maybe Elizabeth Warren is too powerful with Biden, and so maybe that just kind of gets shut out. But to me, presidential elections are a huge way to gain influence with the coming presidency for 4 years.
Yeah, I think it was a Coinbase did their crypto down hall yesterday in New Hampshire. I wish I could have gone to that one, but they had, like you said, more of the lower tier candidates. But at the end of the day, at least Coinbase is taking the very overt strategy of being very public and making sure crypto comes up in the primaries, in the election cycle. We'll see if there's, if these fruits do pay off or they do backfire. I've worked on campaigns before. I've seen both play out in both circumstances. So I usually hesitate. But at the same time, Coinbase has decided to take a certain action. And I think it's great. I think it's good that we have someone stepping forward and engaging on this front. Because they got a lot to fight for here. And so they're putting all hands on deck. And I think that's like the last thing I want to highlight too is, and I'm sure hopefully the states are feeling a little bit of this as well, but the engagement from folks realizing that DC and the capitals are so important in terms of their business strategy as a whole is immense. And I think we're seeing a lot more resources come to DC. I mean, when I joined the lobbying side, I think we had maybe 5 lobbyists and policy folks in the crypto space. We are now probably 5 times that number, 7 times that number, still massively like half of what the banks have at least. But it's
something.
It's something. And I think folks know that, like, look, if you want to be in the United States, you got to fight these battles, and you just can't, hope that one group or one company is going to take the brunt of this. We all work together. We all talk to each other. And the idea is like, look, we're all on the same team. You might be a centralized exchange, but DeFi is important for your future. So let's all make sure you're aware of their issues as well. And so I think that's going to be hopefully a theme for 2024 is more folks realize that, look, we're closer at the precipice here. We got to get more resources to DC. And hopefully that groundswell from the ETF, if it does get approved, can really move that. But folks just need to hear that you got to put resources into your policy, folks, because the narrative in the media is, or one Twitter take or one media interview, that's not going to move the needle for a senator to move crypto legislation. Like, it takes a lot more than that.
Well, and funny enough, if we hit a bull run or a bull market during 2024, hopefully that only helps, not only with funding, but with hype, and your average person getting FOMO, paying attention, and being like, "Oh wow, who's the crypto friendly guy now that Bitcoin's at 60K or something?"
I am getting those texts over from folks saying like, what's the one to buy? I'm like, hey, I'm not a financial advisor. I can't.
Yeah.
But,
sorry, mom. Sorry, dad.
We're feeling it. Hopefully you're feeling it over there in Miami too, or Florida.
Yeah, we just had Art Basel. There were over 157 small crypto events, right? Each with their own communities and little parties, anywhere from 10 to 100 people. I mean, so Art Basel is like crypto and NFTs and Web3 have really taken it over in a lot of ways.
Let's fingers crossed. We could use a bull market pretty soon. So
yeah,
it looks like it's hopefully going in the right direction. But we'll see. We will see how DC comes to play with it, because election year, things slow down. So warning folks ahead of time. Policy's hard, but election year is even tougher.
True. That's good to know. Well, Ron, that's all I got for you today. I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure I'll have you back on here in the near future.
Always great chat, Sam. Really appreciate it, man.